Hey everyone, Lee here. I just finished eating a salad. It was pretty tasty. It had an interesting dressing. It was kind of like vinaigrette and fruit cocktail. It sounds odd, but it was really tasty, so it put me in the mood to read the next chapter of my novel, Compulsion. This is the sixth chapter. Janet was not sure if she was in a dream. She was home and wearing a tucked-in sweater, so she kept her composure. However, there was an odd sense that she just appeared in her living room without her knowing what happened previously. She did not remember putting on that sweater today, except in her memory, which was coming back, she knew that she had worn it for a whole month without ever taking it off. As her memory was returning, she recollected spending one day 2 weeks ago cleaning her house so guests would not complain. No one complained anyway, but she liked to safeguard against the possibility. She reached up, dusted the ceiling, scrubbed the floors, and washed the walls. As she stretched, her sweater stayed tight, as though it could never be removed. Her sleeves were secure where they were pushed up, never working down from her arms, even when she tried pushing them. She was concerned that, should there be a time she needed to take it off, it would stay stuck on her. She did not need to use the bathroom or take a shower, which was strange. She was glad that the time spent cleaning her house paid off. Things were working out in her everyday situation. Her father arranged a meeting between her, him, and a number of other people who were to discuss her progress as a new lawyer. Her father suggested she read the novels of Louis Auchincloss for her education. She did so and enjoyed them, but the novels were more about the inner lives of the characters than actual law practices. She figured he liked Louis Auchincloss's literature and wanted to share that appreciation with her. She became suddenly aware the moment was a dream, but somehow the list of people, except for one, were familiar acquaintances. Her friend from high school, Luke Marvin, would be there. Luke was bringing his brother, Peter, a man not as friendly and perhaps a bit dishonest, but had the ability to act cordial in a group's gathering. There would be Peter's friend Spencer Tilden and Oliver Bentley, rumored by Luke to be Spencer's lover. Janet asked Peter if Luke was correct, and Peter pretended not to hear the question. There was less certainty Walter Denton, her next-door neighbor, would show up. If he did, perhaps Zachary Norman, her neighbor from across the street, would be there also. Walter liked to tell Zachary where he was going, and Zachary, as a writer, wanted to tag along, so he had reference notes for his novels. Walter was hoping to be a main character in a best-selling novel by Zachary. However, Zachary had no publishing contract. He had written 10 novels that were typed neatly on paper, sitting on bookshelves. Janet's father, Stephen, also mentioned a family named Goldman who would be there. She recognized that name. Sherman Goldman had left more than several $1 million to his children and grandchildren. Apparently, Sherman's wife, Goethe, had owned a catering business back in the days of the Depression in New York in the 1930s. However, Goethe saved all her money and did not mention to anyone where she hid the secret stash. Sherman worked as a train operator at the Bay Area Rapid Transit Station in San Francisco, thinking he and his wife were merely working class level. However, when Goethe died, Sherman packed up all of her possessions, including her clothes. As he reached for something on the top shelf in the closet, his foot moved a loose board on the floor, which revealed a lot of money underneath it. Sherman was in his 70s when he found the money, and felt he did not really need much of it. He took $1,000 from the pile and put the rest in a safe deposit box in a bank for his family after he died. He was not fond of their careless behavior towards their weight and health, but he did not want the money to go to strangers. When her father showed up later that evening, he was accompanied by the Goldman family. Janet understood why Sherman Goldman was not fond of them. Harold was 300 pounds and looked 400. He rode in an electric wheelchair that had scuff marks all over it. He was wearing a black suit and tie with white shirt, as if he came from a funeral, but his suit was dirty and wrinkled and smelled like mold. He made popping sounds with his mouth, causing spit to land on the floor. Janet wanted to make him leave immediately, but her father held up his hand, gesturing for her to be patient. Thelma Goldman was 400 pounds and wore a dress that looked like it was originally a piece of wallpaper. She walked slowly like she was falling asleep, but her clothes smelled good, and she behaved well enough. Christine Goldman was wearing a long and loose sweatshirt with a picture of Bert Convy on the front, and sweatpants. She had a portable cassette player with her, and she was wearing headphones. She nodded her head to the music and mouthed what seemed to be words to a song. Rose Goldman wore a dress similar to Thelma's. They must have shared the same wallpaper. Rose smiled as if she was happy to be there, but something about that smile irritated Janet. Rose seemed to be too happy, as if she was rehearsing a part in a show and had to keep smiling while playing her role. When John Goldman entered, she was surprised. He had none of the same characteristics as the rest of his family. Physically, his facial features proved he was related, but he was slim and dressed well in a tucked-in, short-sleeved blue polo top with black jeans and a black belt. Something about John reminded Janet of herself. She wanted to talk with him. She approached her father and asked, "Can we forget about the lawyer stuff? There is one person here I would like to talk to, and that's it." He nodded. "I know who you mean. Come here and tell Harold all about your trip to Turkey last year." Harold approached them. He asked, "How are both of you tonight? I heard my name mentioned." "My daughter thinks we are a part of a committee to assess her lawyer skills. I'm afraid I put that idea across. What she doesn't know is that I brought all of you here so she can get to know some of my best friends." Harold said, "Thanks, Steve. I'm sure that the money we gave you to handle our inheritance didn't bias your opinion on us." Steve smiled. "There's a time and place for money and a time and place for friendship." Harold nodded. "I think that way too. The landlord of my building doesn't agree. I've been 5 months overdue on my rent, and I don't intend to pay 1 damn cent." "Oh my, that's not a good thing to avoid. I'm surprised he hasn't kicked you out yet." "Really? How can that be?" "People want money." "Well, okay, if he wants his rent, I guess I can pay him. I hadn't thought of it." Janet could not believe what she was hearing. Of course, she was in a dream, so the rules were not the same as reality, but if she remembered correctly, her encounter with Harold in waking life was not much better. She said, "There's someone here I would like to meet." Steve nodded. "I totally understand. You want to meet Harold. Well, I have him here for you. I think he's rather handsome. Is that so, big boy?" Harold laughed. "Since we're in the privacy of the house of someone other than me, I'll admit that I do appreciate how I look from time to time. If I could make love to myself, I would." Steve said, "Speaking of something along the same topic, where would be Spencer and Oliver? I didn't see them last weekend. Will they be around?" "I'm not sure. I think so. We're trying to convince Zachary to be a part of it. I think we'll be able to convince him to be with us." "That will be great. I don't know the man too well, and I would like to correct that mistake. He says he isn't—" "I think you know what I mean. He doesn't like men in that way." Harold shrugged. I can change his mind. I have an old copy of an album by Joey D. and the Peppermints. I can put that on and he'll dance with me big time. I would think that folk music would be better for seduction. Take all his clothes and put him in a loincloth. Wouldn't that be fun? Yes, but not if I am eating fried chicken. I don't want to soil his clothes with my greasy hands. Janet thought the situation was going too far. Spencer Tilden, Oliver Bentley, and Luke and Peter Marvin were not there, which was a good thing, considering the type of conversations she heard between her dad and Harold. Something seemed as if she was gaining information about who they really were. She said, I don't want to talk to Harold, I want to talk to someone else. Steve nodded and said, Sure, let me introduce you to Rose Goldman. That's not who I mean. Oh, you can't be serious. Rose is really great, come on. He grabbed her arm and brought her to Rose. Janet said, I want to talk to someone else. Rose nodded. I can tell you like to eat spicy foods. That's why you're so irritable. Do you know the effects of black pepper? How about beef broth? Those ingredients will harm your soul. Janet sighed. I guess then I'll eat a lot of black pepper. That's the opposite of what you should do. Janet laughed. Spices and herbs work as tonics. They are good for you. Your family is rumored to be very unhappy, and I'm afraid you might be the cause of it. Your son must have escaped your deranged thinking. It is true he does not listen to me and never will. He says black pepper is good for the brain capillaries, and he writes stories when he puts pepper on his food. Why is he wasting time on imagination when he can deal with real life? I'm trying to hook him up with a girlfriend. Do you know what type of woman he is looking for? Rose sighed. From what I understand, you would fit the bill. He wants someone who lives in a nice neighborhood, wears her shirts tucked in, listens to jazz music, goes on walks to parks, all the stuff that makes people lazy. There are a lot of really eligible ladies who work in the discount grocery stores who think he's attractive. They are overweight like me, which is a good thing. That's one point of view in which I agree with Walter Denton. Overweight people are healthier than slim people. I don't agree with him about eating food that's tasty, though. To me, the tastiest food is the modest bite unencumbered with spices or flavorings. The perfect meal is a potato, either raw or boiled, and string beans, either cooked or uncooked. Immediately, Janet walked away from Rose. She could not stand to listen any more to someone who seemed so much the reason for John's empty life. Janet had not met John yet, but she could tell that, though he was listening to Steve and Harold as if he enjoyed what they were saying, she sensed there was something blocking what should be. The moment should change, so she and he were connected. She walked towards him and said, Hello. John looked at her as if he could not believe what he saw. She was not sure why his surprise was so complete, even more so than hers, but she figured he was amazed at her outfit. However, she was merely wearing something in which she felt comfortable. She was no longer sure the time span had been a month. In her dream memory, she put the outfit on 10 minutes previously, and the party now had began only 1 minute ago. He did not say hello yet. He just stood still, transfixed. Steve winked at Janet. He said, We've been talking about how things are over in Ohio. It's not the most pleasant place, but they sure do have a lot of good candy stores to shop in. I went there last year and a fellow aimed his shotgun at me, but I just asked if he knew where to get candy. So he put his gun down and smiled. He told me he owned a candy store, but nobody bought anything, so he thought of closing it. I said I'd buy $500 worth of candy. He was happy. We walked across the street to his store, and I bought a lot of stuff and said I would think about going to his store again if I had ever went back to Ohio. That man was delighted. Harold said, You just sounded like Walter. Are you sure you're not him? Steve said, I wouldn't mind having his money. He is richer than me. Janet knew how to lure John towards her. After taking a deep breath, she walked up the stairs, stopped halfway at the top, turned around, and extended her hand. She looked directly at him. He was to come up, stand next to her, and give her his hand. John felt an odd impulse. He was not sure what to do until he noticed her up on the stairs, with her hand out. She looked serious. He walked, almost automatically, towards her. His steps were slow and methodical because the situation seemed planned by a higher level, and he did not want to offend the way things were structured. When he was right next to her, he gave her his hand. She took it and held firmly, giving a few shakes, and then just holding on. She did not say anything. John said, "Hello." She asked, "How are you?" He said, "I am in a new state of mind. I don't know what I mean by that. I just know what I know, and this is it." She nodded. "You can have your own life away from your family if that is what you choose." He laughed. "It would be funny if you and I just stayed like this in handshake mode forever." "It can happen." He shrugged. "Well, I know it can spiritually happen between two people, but I don't know about really." She repeated, "It can happen." He widened his eyes. "Oh." She asked, "Would you like to sit down?" "Sure." They sat on the stairs, still holding hands. She pointed at the guests. "Is that what you have to deal with all the time?" He shrugged. "Yes, I suppose. But that's what life is like. We have things we are dealt with, and that is reality." She shook her head. "It does not have to be like that. It can be changed. Your uncle, for instance, used to work in a hospital. He was not slim, but he is gaining more weight as we speak. Why is that? He met my next-door neighbor, Walter Denton. Walter poisoned your uncle with thoughts of junk food and ideas that being overweight is healthy. He wants to be thinner, but you're right in that he has been acting funny since he met Walter. My mom was always overweight. Her mother, Grandmother Goethe, owned a delicatessen and served a lot of pickled meats and sautéed vegetables and made the children eat that type of food every day. My mom grew a disliking for it. She claimed she suffered from a nervous disorder until she eliminated spices from her life." Janet nodded. "I think the problem has more to do with her instead of the food she eats. However, I give you the opportunity to change your life." "How?" "You can stay with me." "How can that be possible?" "I'll never let you go." John did not answer. He just sat still, taking in the offer for several minutes, until Janet woke up.